Good evening to everyone. I, Shobha Mishra Ghosh, Assistant Secretary General FICCI, welcome you all to the first edition of FICCI Arise Cambridge University Press webinar series, Schools Post-Lockdown, What, Why, and How. At the outset, I would like to thank Cambridge University Press for collaborating with FICCI on such a pertinent and important subject. Since the audience is more from the education side, I would like to take 2 minutes to inform that Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, that is FICCI, is an apex industry body and has been one of the first industry associations to actually work in the area of policy research in education. And we have been active for the last 2 decades. A lot of recommendations that have been put up in national education policy has been work and recommendations from FICCI. It was about 6 years back that FICCI felt and understood that there was a large cohort of private education providers in the school education as well. And that is when the school education committee was set up. And 4 years back, the FICCI Alliance for Reimagining School Education was set up under the leadership, under the current leadership. FICCI is an old body which was established in 1927, and essentially we act as a bridge between the government and the industry. And in case of education, we are a bridge between the government as well and the education provider. We also act as a think tank to ideate. Now, when the COVID-19 pandemic has left everybody kind of stunned, and much has been talked about, and I think there is a overload of webinars on the subject. So everybody knows what is COVID-19 pandemic, how it has impacted the economy adversely. In fact, India and China are the only 2 countries in the globe that will do a positive, GDP growth, and the rest of the world is going into the negative growth. When it has brought in the entire society, the economy to a standstill, obviously education was the first sector to be impacted. And schools were the first one to be locked down. And that brought in a large community of children and youth who were, actively engaged in the education ecosystem. They were out of schools. And UNESCO data tells that almost about 1.5 billion, children and youth are out of the education system today. Yes, online education has come to the rescue of few, and those are the advantaged, segment of the society. And actually, the equity and access to education has never been threatened as much before. I mean, if you look at India, it is the majority of your state schools, your low budget private schools, they do not have the capacity or the infrastructure to actually get into the digital and online education system. So the government and the education providers have to look at one, how can education be distributed, how can access to all segment of society be available. So when we are looking at the post-lockdown situation and the resumption of school and university education system, obviously, like the economy has been reset, so has the education system put in a reset mode. And therefore, we need to think through. In fact, we have been doing a lot of brainstorming and webinars on this subject. And yesterday, in fact, we had a webinar with the Haryana state government, and NCRT was also represented over there, where we were discussing like the 3 new normal, 3 ingredients for the new normal for whether it is education or economy is social distancing or physical distancing, as they are calling, and health and hygiene. These 2 are going to have, so all your standard operating processes or all your strategies are going to revolve around it. And these two factors are going to have a major impact on your capital expenditure, because you will have to reorient, restructure your infrastructure. And third, and the most important thing is the learning, of course, the learning ecosystem. And for doing that, and if you have to maintain physical distancing, obviously the entire dynamics of your school school arrangement is going to be have to be rethought about, because obviously when you have about 40 to 50 students in a class, today you will be asked to only have 20 students in the class, and therefore you will have to have probably hybrid system. Now, how are you going to do the academic calendar? How is the entire scheduling of your examination system, your evaluation process, content development, delivery of education? Everything is going to be a major change that one needs to have to look at in a different lens. Parents, the other thing is that all stakeholders will have to come together to work. It cannot be that only teachers and education providers will have to think. It's the government, it's the and even within the government, it is the interministerial, governments will have to come together. The school education providers, principals, teachers, students, parents, everybody has to come together, because there is going to be a complete shift of mindset, and that's going to take a huge toll on everybody. These are some of the things that is what we will be discussing today during our this session. And what is important is what is it going to change due to COVID-19 pandemic? Why is it important to bring about those changes? It's very important to understand the why of it. And of course, how is going to be very, very important, and a lot of capacity building is required for everybody to implement it seamlessly. FICCI has actually developed a post-COVID audit solution, which we will be kind of rolling out. We are taking the help of health experts to actually come up with the guidelines and protocols, and it will be a complete solution which will look at both the all the four elements, that is the academic, non-academic, administrative, and residential aspects which are important to a school education. So with this, I take this opportunity to welcome our esteemed panelists. So we have with us Mr. Nagaprasad Tumula. He is our immediate past chair and also the member of FICCI Arise governing body and director, People Combine. We also have with us Ms. Abha Adams. She is an education advisor and a very dear friend of FICCI Arise. Mr. Mark Beals, head of Senior School AIS Vietnam and Cambridge panel. We have Ms. Ramya Venkatraman, founder and CEO, Center for Teacher Accreditation, CENTA. She is well known and she has also been active with FICCI Arise for a long time. We have Ms. Preeti Hingorani, Vice President, Brand Cambridge University Press, and she has also been engaging with FICCI Arise for some time now. And we have, last but not the least, Dr. Arunabh Singh, his chair, UP West FICCI Arise, and Director, Nehru World School, who is also the moderator of today's session. So at the end, I would just like to say that with every challenge, there is an opportunity. And I think this is an opportunity for us to reset our lives and adjust to the new normal. With this, I hand over the session to Aruna. Over to you, Aruna.
Thank you, Shobha. That was fantastic. I've actually just taken off the first page of what I was going to say. And so you've actually done the job for me. To everybody who's on the Zoom platform, we had 1,000 people in the first second of this webinar going live. And to about 600 people who I can see are live on Facebook right now. I know this number eventually goes up. And this number also goes up because especially for people who are watching it on Facebook, before I say anything else, I want to share with you this power that you have today. And that power is to share what these fantastic speakers are going to be talking about with other teachers who may be on your timeline, but not have had an opportunity to register for this webinar. We would also be able to share this to the parents and for them to understand how much concern do their teachers, do their school principals have for what is coming. So it is not that we are sitting there like ducks and waiting for things to happen. We are busy planning. So if you're watching this on Facebook, it'll be a terrific idea for you to reshare this on your timeline as well, and hope that more and more people are able to hear what these fantastic people are going to say. Not me, but these fantastic people who are going to say. As a moderator, I'm telling you, every 15 years, one opportunity comes when you get to head a panel where each panelist is a keynote speaker. And he's been a keynote speaker to over 100 keynotes. And now they've got this 6 minutes to put their thought together and share it with you. Now, I understand this will be difficult for them as well. So I got my kitchen timer along. I do it every time I go on a webinar to moderate things. So if you hear a bell, it is my kitchen timer going and telling them we've run out of time for you. Before we move forward, I want to bring in Preeti. This webinar series is Preeti's brainchild. This conversation of that there is a lot that has been spoken about of what we should be doing right now. But it's about time that we started talking about what do we do when schools actually reopen? What do we do when this lockdown ends? Preeti is a vice president for the brand and public relations at Cambridge. She has been involved in working with the governments, with NGOs, with schools across the Indian subcontinent. And I know Cambridge has been involved in doing exactly the same across the world. Preeti, while you make your address, there is one thing that I want to ask you. We know that Cambridge has actively been working with different stakeholders, governments, education boards, schools, teachers, and has been equipping them to solve this problem. There is a lot of your offering that has gone free online for anybody to download as well. I want to understand from you, how has the response been from these different stakeholders on what Cambridge is doing and what perhaps Cambridge could be doing?
Right. Thank you, Aruna. I think one, I'll definitely start by thanking Shobha and the FICCI Arise team. You guys are doing a brilliant job and have taken this initiative to start these discussions in very much our own Indian context. And I'm also grateful to all the panelists who made the time for us today. And this is a brainchild of FICCI Arise and Cambridge University Press. So thank you for being here. And each one of you who's joined in today, your presence makes all the difference to us. Now, coming back to Arun, your question, yes, there's a lot of work that's been happening. And I think what, as a responsible organization, what we've been doing is ensuring that the teaching and learning process continues without any interruption in this time of crisis. But I definitely say that this was crisis education that we all were addressing. We were not prepared for it. And we all put our best step forward. But going forward, when we started speaking, as we work with different governments, policy makers, educators like yourself, engage with teachers, what we realize is it is important for us to now start thinking that what is the way forward, and also start doing this research on what the trends are looking like. I would say that I still will leave it to the panelists where the expertise will come out in terms of what's going to work on ground. But what I'm going to share is when we're speaking with all these stakeholders across the world, one of the key emerging trends that we are witnessing and is most relevant to our discussion today is the word resilience. Now, resilience has been the emerging theme for policymakers and educators uniformly and is the common denominator for all of us. We are aware that localized closures like this might now become a feature of the schooling system for some time. At least we need to be prepared. In fact, when we were looking at it, we also could possibly argue that shouldn't this be a feature of the schooling system beyond the crisis? As one of the implications that we keep seeing about, say, climate change, globalization, we're talking about transmitted zoonotic diseases coming from the viruses and the bacteria. These definitely have the possibility to be more frequent. As educationists, we all are thinking, and we're thinking about this readiness programs. That's the focus of the discussion today. So this readiness program of reopening, so that we can react to some situation like this rapidly, change when it changes, and without compromising the quality of education provided to students, especially from the emotional and mental well-being. The other key trend that is definitely emerging, we all know technology. Now with technology, Shobha talked about this digital divide is also there. There are so many students who don't have access to technology. But for this discussion today, where there is technology, there is access to technology, there has been pure play of the internet, which has worked reasonably well. There has been TV being used as a medium, radio in many countries, and teachers have adopted, which is brilliant. Teachers have really adopted into this learning system. So what does this mean? This actually means that there was capacity. There is a possibility to develop this capacity in the system and move between in-school teaching and remote learning. The only thing is that we hadn't really thought about this capacity so far. So I think as we go forward and as Cambridge, we speaking with all our stakeholders, we will be coming back to you saying that this is what seems like the solution that might work going forward with the consent of all stakeholders. So my purpose really is to understand that how we can start refining this capacity in the best interest of the education system. I'm really looking forward to the expert advice of all the panelists and the educators who have joined in. And let's see how we can convert this crisis into opportunity, right? Thank you. Back to you, Aruna.
Thank you very much, Preeti. That was just the right context of the fact that we have capacity, and the question is, how do we now navigate what is being now called the new normal? And on behalf of teachers who are here, I want to say this. I think teachers across the world have surprised people. How quickly they have changed their gears and their platforms. They have surprised. They've surprised their school principals, their school managements, parents, and everybody. So if you are a teacher who's listening to this, on behalf of education community, I think I would want to put this on record that we thank you for not just doing it, but doing it at the speed at which you've been able to do it, and with the enthusiasm that you've been able to do this. I want to get this thing started, and I would be in a very short while going to Mr. Nagaprasad, who is a member of FICCI Arise governing body. He has been the chairperson for FICCI as well, and he has been a founder and chairman of People Combine, which started Oak Ridge International Schools across the country. But before I do that, Mr. Prasad, last week my daughter was telling me in the morning, "Papa, do you know what is that one thing that I can see but you can't?" And I said, "No, darling, I don't know that. What is it?" He says, "Papa, I can see my dream, but you can't." And I was like, "Oh wow, that is really deep." And as she went away doing what she was doing, I was thinking, I put my school head brain hat on and said, "Darling, I can't see your dreams, and so can't you. But right now, you possibly can't see my nightmares as well. My nightmares of what am I going to be doing right now, and what do I do when these schools reopen as a school leader, as a school promoter." So, Mr. Prasad, with your experience of opening schools, running schools very successfully, and being a school promoter that a lot of us go to for advice, we would want to know from you, what is the advice that you would have to offer to school promoters, to school leaders, so that some of their nightmares can possibly become dreams?
Yep. Thank you, Arnab. Hi, Shobha, Preeti, dear fellow panel members and participants. Good afternoon. If anyone tries to forecast the future, it is too much overconfidence in one's abilities. That too during this kind of unprecedented times. I don't dare to do that. I will try to build some scenarios that can give some lead indicators. However, it's easier to tell what's going to happen after 5 years than what's going to happen tomorrow. The farther terms focus is always on the direction of the change, whereas the near term is highly detail focused. That's where most will go wrong. So I just share a small my screen. Yeah. So again, these scenarios will change quite a lot depending on longer the COVID crisis or COVID fear persists, different the scenarios are going to be. Scenarios will be very different for different price point and different geography schools. If school leader is the final authority, the scenarios are different. And if schools are run by management committees, the scenarios span out to be very different. Some changes will be permanent and some changes will be temporary. Here I would like to also clarify one important thing for all of us. During the lockdown period, schools were not closed. Teachers were teaching and students were learning. The only difference is school buildings were closed. So let's stop saying schools reopen. Only school buildings reopen. So I could possibly think 4 possible scenarios. The first and the best scenario is February 2020 coming back. We all will be so relieved of that. Not so bad what we are doing now currently, April 2020 scenario continuation. This is the second scenario. The third and most likely, but not so bad scenario is some days it is like February and some days it is like April. That all depends on the cases in the new COVID cases in the school or in the neighborhood and consequent government decisions. But there is the fourth scenario. This is the most complex scenario. One is that on which day a student comes to school and which day attends classes from home is uncertain. And more importantly, at the discretion of the parent or student. When parents bring up children's safety concerns, no government decision is final. Very little control either school or teacher might have. If schools prepare for this fourth scenario, all other scenarios will become easy. Then what kind of impact on the schools? There are different dimensions of impacts. The first is financial. There will be no visibility or control on revenue. Arnav, this is for you. As a result, no control on budget. Focus should be on cash flow, just how to manage this month. That is the kind. Every likelihood in the short term, costs also may go up. Then HR. Every teacher and employee is expected to put almost double the effort. Parents are watching the teacher's performance live all the time. There is high performance anxiety for the teachers. But unfortunately, there is no possibility for commiseration in compensation. Leadership focus shall be high on teachers' motivation. Then technology. Overnight, student screen time debate found no relevance. I remember participating in these debates quite a long. Schools are forced to spend a disproportionate amount on the new technology and e-content. As a result, it's a huge resource utilization imbalance. If someone waits for the old norm to come back, may lose the game. Then parents and student satisfaction. The worst affected are students. Student engagement and learning are at the lowest when compared to classroom scenario. Even for teachers, it is difficult to sustain the initial novelty and euphoria. The irony is teachers are putting the best possible effort, but the parent satisfaction is possibly not great. Increased transparency may put pressure on the fee as well. Then the last but most difficult one, regulatory. The already complex regulation has become a maze and no clue on what's expected to do and what's happening. Schools will run the risk of norms violation, be the COVID precautions, fee or academic rules to follow. Playing blind and when caught, cutting the sorry face would be the possible scenario, but risky. But it also gives quite a few opportunities. In the next 12 to 24 months, the possible opportunities would be, and before we get into the opportunities, what is opportunity for us? Earlier I said the cost may increase. If it can bring down the cost, that's great opportunity. If we can reduce the fee, that is even more greater opportunity for the parents and as a community whole. Then for the children, if the quality improves, they are the luckiest ones. And finally, as managements, if the operating surplus. Actually, I put it as profitability. Arnav insisted me to change it to operating surplus. Whatever is that, it is what matters to the managements. But being the stakeholders, all these things are important. If anybody says one is more important or one is less important, we are mistaken. The first opportunity I see is it is high time to replace technology aliens with natives and clean up archaic administrative structures. In normal times, to do so, the resistance would be very high. For example, in the normal course, most of the schools might have experienced a huge resistance in tech implementation in the past. But such a change has potential to reduce cost and improve the quality. The second opportunity is it is easy to collaborate with other schools to share the cost of technology and content. It is much easier to collaborate on digital initiatives than physical resources sharing. By doing so, there is scope for cost reduction and to create high value. Then the third one is with increased transparency, non-performers and underperformers will have trouble. Means opportunity for performers. Focus should be on the quality of parent communication. Otherwise, the parents may fail to perceive your good work. And the last opportunity I foresee is possible to serve most students with the same infrastructure and resources. For example, a school may offer a parallel blended program where dependency on physical and human resources is reduced, thereby cost. That means scope to reduce fee and earn more operating surplus. Dear friends, at a fundamental level, what is change? Recently, I attended a workshop where it is defined as life equal to change. If there is no change, means no life. Too much change too soon is what we call crisis. It is time to reinvent oneself, be it the teacher or the leader or even the school as a whole. The role of the leadership is to manage change. During the crisis, leaders should be very close to the front line to manage the crisis successfully. Most people expect things to move linear. Migrant labor issue is the best example of things happening beyond anybody's guess. Things will not happen as one foresees. So without being too predictive, but well intended, empathetic, and opportunistic, mind is important to capitalize from the crisis. As Winston Churchill once said, never waste a good crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tumala. I quite liked this. If you may I request you if you could unshare your screen now, if that's okay. Yeah. So the manner in which you simplified and put things for all of us to chew on. In fact, as you were speaking, I think you were on your third slide, and there were people asking if we are going to get Mr. Prasad's PPT. And if all the panelists here agree before you move forward, is it okay if we send all the PPTs to people in our thank you emails? Right. So that is something that we will do. Some speakers will use a PPT and some will not. But recording of this will be going to you. The PPTs, if anybody is using, will go to you. So as I was listening to you, there was a thought that was coming to my mind that for a long time now, there has been this conversation about will computers take over from teachers? Will online platforms take over from schools? But borrowing a leaf from what you just said of how you believe that it is a time for performers. So it would probably be right that while technology may not replace teachers or schools, but schools and teachers who use technology effectively may perhaps replace who don't. So with that thought, we would want to move ahead and go to Ms. Abha Adams. And before I come to you, there is a question that has come from Mona Anand. And she's asked, what will be the student-teacher relation like post-COVID-19? So I know this may be a part of what you are intending to speak. So when you go online, this is perhaps something that some people would want to know, and I would as well. Ms. Abha Adams has been, she's an institution in herself, having spent over 40 years in the field of education, having led schools, having led teams that ran schools and advised many schools. She comes to this platform as a thesaurus of sorts to give clarity on how is this changing. Ma'am, my specific question to you is, these kids and so the teachers have stayed home for so many months now. When they come back, what happens to their social and emotional well-being? How can the school community sort of come out of that challenge where there is some trauma, there is some fear while we are still back? So how do schools maintain that physical distancing, the social distancing, and not so much in the body, but in the mind? How do we refresh that, reboot it, and put it back on the process of learning? So if you may enlighten us on that. And thank you very much once again for agreeing to come on this panel.
Thank you very much.
The next 6 minutes are all yours. Thank you.
And a very good afternoon, everybody. I know Arunab is a very tough timekeeper, so I'm just going to fly through what I have to say and hopefully answer the questions asked in interim. I'd like to focus on how to approach the new ways of leadership that we are all being asked to adopt at this time. I'd also like to speak briefly on rebuilding the school communities, the social and emotional well-being of our parents, students, and teachers, and an opportunity. This is an opportunity to just take a quick look at rebooting our teaching and learning. I see this as a very testing time. We're going to experiment, we're going to test, and if it doesn't work, we have to come back to the table, to the drawing board. We are also going to be having to be adaptable at the time, because solutions are not going to work. The ready-made solutions are not there. And we have to anticipate problems in very complex situations, do risk assessments, and plan. And this can only happen when, as a leader, you bring the school together. Which is tough, I know. That's the only way to actually do it. So bringing the school community of teachers and students and parents together, all the while living with uncertainty and staying very positive yourself. And once that happens, only then can you chart out the way forward. The most important, I think, factor in this is faculty morale. If faculty are low in how they're feeling, and if their morale is low, we are not going to be able to take all the other stakeholders with us. So in building the community, task forces were mentioned, and I think that might be the way to go. But task forces have representations of all the stakeholders, and collectively you come to certain decisions depending on the task force that you're attached with. Teachers specifically be deeply immersed in the planning, and the planning will range from how learning can continue, how can we support learners that fall behind, as well as our own particular special children. How can we ensure social distancing? How do we reorganize our classes? What are our key educational goals? Can we reorganize our curriculum? Can we realign our assessments, keeping in mind a very, very short school year? If all of this has to be achieved, the key thing is communication. And the tone of the communication is that we are in this together, and only then are we going to overcome the odds. So it might mean putting a communications team together, every class having a teacher who takes the lead with communication, and those teachers' capacities will need to be rebuilt. But critically, consider the different ways in which parent and student engagement can be ramped up. Moving quickly to curriculum, the pedagogical shift has been Teutonic, and our teachers have come through with flying colors, and they will continue to need that support. Our students who are moving online will also need to develop skills of being self-directed learners as well as researchers. But in all of this, I would just like to pose a question. We have an academic year that is greatly reduced. Can we use this opportunity collectively to re-look at our content-driven curriculum? Focus on the essentials in all our learning ladders for all the subjects? Absolutely. But as much as possible, try and create meaning and understanding about the times that we live in for our students, and involve our students in the question, what is it that you want to know? What is it that you would like to learn? What is this pandemic telling us that we need to understand about our environment, ecology, morality, and ethics? What are wet markets? What is the wild animal trade? The devastation that we have seen as migrants have boarded trains, what does that tell us about our society? The devastation we have seen through cyclones, through the locust invasion. What can we do about all these things? How do we understand all these things? So I urge you to read George Monbiot and one other who writes for The Guardian, and Professor Avijit Pathak, who's a professor of sociology at JNU. And his post is doing the rounds at the moment on social media platforms, and some very interesting discussions are happening. And what he says is he urges teachers to establish the spirit of rhythmic communication students. And I think that might answer your question. Understand their worries and doubts when fear is normal. Victims are stigmatized and distancing is the new discourse. And he makes 3 points very quickly. Through our curriculum, how do we renew our organic connectedness with our ecosystem? Second, the pandemic and the lockdown have compelled us to look inwards to our inner selves. How do we nurture these inner selves? How can we evolve what Shubha was calling initially resilience? How do we evolve endurance and patience? And then he says, and I'm going to quote, meaningful education is not a debate over the pros and cons of different tech platforms. It is not even the right time to complete your syllabus. Meaningful education is about the art of living when the known world has collapsed and bookish knowledge is now futile. So that brings me to the social and emotional well-being of our communities. We already had crises of anxiety, panic attacks, and self-harm in our schools, and the present situation has amplified that. We need to focus on our return, and even now, as we are in lockdown, to hear the voices of children, to hear what is their understanding, how are they responding to this present dystopia that's a bit like out of a science fiction for them. Young children are bewildered. They don't understand. They ask questions like, will I ever be able to play again? Will I be able to go to the park? Can I wrestle with my friend? Will I always wear a mask? Do I have to sanitize my friends? And then the fear, if mommy coughs, is she going to die? Does she have coronavirus? Will my grandparents die? Older children, there's a different kind of anxiety. And many I know are slipping into depression because there is a dark uncertainty about college education, about the availability of jobs in that scenario. India ranks as the most depressed country in the world, and our student suicides are the highest. To that, if you add the disturbing latest statistic of domestic violence through the figures in Childline, you will see how very, very difficult this is. So which makes it urgent for us as educators and leaders to create safe spaces for discussion and for talking in our schools across all age groups, using the time-honored circle time method, which can be so very effective if we do it properly. Engage with students, focusing on their well-being, addressing their fears, assuring them that they only need to ask for help and they will get it, and they are not in this alone. Preparing teachers to understand the shift, ramping up the sessions by counselors, but how many sessions can a counselor do? And how many counselors can a school have? Our teachers have to be counselors. For younger children, the class teacher is the first port of call. They have to be there as observers, listen attentively, find solutions, support them and their families. But for this, the teachers themselves, their capacities will have to be developed. Classroom communities have to be. And finally, if our teachers are holding our students, who's holding the teachers? And we've seen that. The teachers have to be held by leadership and management. They have to be held by the whole community. One school leader I know spoke to me that during this lockdown, she made sure that once every 3 weeks, she picked up the phone and spoke to every single member of the faculty, just to ask her, how have you been? What have you done? What have you cooked? Did you do anything special? So all this community building, albeit online, will have to become something part and parcel of our DNA. So schools as we know them are physical communities. They are social communities, and that's been completely disrupted. We lost connection, communication, and a sense of a physical community. And I feel that as educators and leaders, these are the priorities that we have to focus on and find solutions to as we go forward. And there is a lot of stuff out there that we can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adams, for that. And what you said just resonated so much with me, and I think you've given me a lot to think about as a school leader. While you were speaking, and I know you addressed it briefly towards the end, there is a question that had come from Sampana Adhikari. And she had asked us, how will teachers cope with this stress post the COVID crisis? Once they actually come back into the classroom, how will they cope with this stress? Would you want to spend a minute and possibly answer that? And if the answer has to come from school leaders, are there some tips that you can offer to them?
I think at the very end of my hurtling through what I had to say because of the time, I did mention that the holding of the teachers is very, very important. And that's where that support will come from leaders as well as school managements. Teachers will need access to counselors as well. There is much more stress going forward. Right now, we know the children are safe and they're in their homes and we're reaching out to them digitally. But when they come to school, we are all going to be on tenterhooks all the time. And there's going to be that deep level of anxiety. Children may sometimes forget about it because, you know, children are children. They will see their mates and they will go, yeah. But as teachers, that's a thread that we're going to have to frankly deal with. So our own reserves of resilience, we've got to nourish, and everybody does it differently. You know, we have to find it within ourselves. I'm sorry, it may not answer the question.
Thank you very much. It certainly does clear things more for all of us. I now want to move to Mark. Mark has a unique distinction amongst everybody who is possibly logged on here. He's the only one who's experienced being in a school post-lockdown. So Mark is the head of senior school for AIS in Vietnam. And Vietnam opened its schools about a month back now. And so they know what it is like to be back in the schools after the lockdown. So Mark, with your experience from across the world where you've worked, and now with your experience in Vietnam, there are a lot of these apprehensions that we have spoken about and ideas that we have of how do we solve this. But you having solved it, though it's slightly different context to India, but are there some tips that you can offer us? And can you possibly also point us towards things that came up that you hadn't expected earlier?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, just to give you some context to begin with, we were closed for about 13 weeks. At the start of the year, we had 2 weeks back in January after our break, and then we weren't allowed back in February. And we restarted, as you say, about 3 weeks ago. So it was, yeah, quite a stressful time, as you can imagine. We are 3 weeks back in now. So if anyone does have any questions about life post-lockdown, I'm happy to take those later. In terms of unexpected needs, obviously, yeah, there were lots. I think one of the most unexpected possibly was that we soon realized that the students actually genuinely like coming to school, and the fact that they are suddenly isolated from each other and from their teachers and from their whole community was a particularly difficult thing. As the previous speaker mentioned, there's a lot of counselling that needs to be done to solve that. I think one way we can address that is actually during the lessons themselves, in terms of thinking about practical solutions. So I'll try and run through quickly some practical things that we did to try and lessen the stress, but obviously we can't remove it completely. Things really like thinking about the kind of learning that takes place, reducing teacher talk time, and having students working collaboratively together with their friends that maybe they haven't spoken to. For several weeks, we had some students literally locked in their condo for 2 months. So the chance to actually work together and talk together, they embraced that probably even more than they would normally in a regular school condition. So encouraging that kind of thing, encouraging projects away from the screen as well, not having students in front of their screens the whole time, obviously is not desirable. When we first started, to give you some history, when we first started, we had a very asynchronous model where we gave students a set amount of work and asked them to complete it in a certain time. And that had limited success. Not all students were completely engaged. And so we moved to a more synchronous model where we generally did follow our timetable, but were very aware that we couldn't really ask students to sit in front of a screen all day, especially the younger students. There are very different needs for different year levels. So we were very aware of that. In terms of unexpected needs for teachers, maybe not that unexpected, but it was a particularly stressful time, especially for teachers with exam year groups, for example. But I think all teachers really struggled to think how they were going to help the students in the best possible way. I think one of the solutions to that, we said very early on, was to be realistic about what can be achieved. It's a very different dynamic. It's a very unique dynamic to have all this distance learning in one go and across the globe as well. So we said to people, be realistic. You may not teach everything you hope to or you plan to. That's okay. We're in a unique situation. We can get over this. We'll get through it. But be realistic. We said we thought, especially as school leaders, there's a lot of technology out there. There's a lot of free technology now that the companies are very usefully offering. At the same time, this probably isn't the time to introduce lots and lots of professional development and new technology. I think working with what people are familiar with helps to reduce stress levels. Students can understand it. They can access it far better. That works very well. We used Microsoft Teams, which has been very good. We introduced it this year, actually. So for a lot of teachers, they did have to get used to it pretty quickly. I think that works very well for collaborative work. For assessments, it's pretty useful. Google Classroom, as I'm sure many people know, is another excellent tool. So that was two areas we looked at. In terms of assessment, I've noticed some of the comments were about assessment there and how can you do that with any meaningful way remotely. The answer is it's very, very difficult. Assessment should be corroborative and valid and standardized. It's very difficult to do that when students are working remotely. We found some solutions. Exam.net is a site that gives pretty good control over a student's work and is particularly good at accessing or assessing if a student is working properly or not. So there are solutions out there. I'd say in general, I wouldn't try and introduce too many new things at this stage. I think this is not the time for that. In terms of the effect on pedagogy, as I sort of hinted at earlier, we certainly did have to think about the way that we deliver lessons effectively. Things, even perhaps it's always important, but even more so in the current situation, having a very clear structure for students at all levels, really obvious learning aims, very explicit learning objectives were crucial. And also varying learning style. I had my lessons in front of me as an English teacher, and I realized that very quickly this wouldn't work in an online situation. So trying to put yourself in the student's shoes and thinking what could work for them, in addition to the context of all the other stress and things that they're going through. They're not there only for an English lesson. There's lots of other issues that they're dealing with. So in general terms, short, sharp activities, lots of collaborative tasks where they can talk to each other to move things along. And we found by doing that, actually, we did actually tend to cover quite a lot of things. But the main thing was, as the previous speakers have said, was really to manage stress levels among students, to try and reassure them, to constantly be in touch with them, as we said, calling them, talking to them, you know, trying to make clear this will come to an end. But it's a very difficult time. Different age groups obviously have different needs as well. My son is 5 years old. He's in kindergarten, particularly challenging to offer any kind of meaningful learning for him during this time. My wife did particularly well at engaging with him and getting to do things, but as we said, we have to be realistic about what can be achieved. For older students, it was quite stressful. We're an IB and an IGCSE school, so for a lot of the time, the students didn't know if they would have final exams or not. So that was an added layer of stress on top of all the other things that were going on there. I guess in terms of pedagogy, and actually for the students as well, it was, you know, certainly for the older students, it was a chance for them to actually think about the way they learned. A lot of our students are going off to university, and we said, well, this is actually an example of you taking ownership of your learning. Inevitably had to be more independent when they were learning. And so from a purely learning educational point of view, that had, there's no benefits to this really at all, but there was something positive in terms of seeing how they learned and how they were learned independently. In terms of, I wrote down a few just practical tips in terms of preempting the challenges that you may be facing. I think being realistic is probably the key thing I mentioned earlier. Some subjects, it's very difficult, art, music, science, they're practical based subjects. It's very, very difficult to recreate all of that remotely, and probably not expecting to would be the first step there. I think listening to students about how they feel, they were very honest with us, very straightforward about the pressures they were facing outside of the classroom, irrespective of their learning, and being really aware of that and going really easy on them and saying, look, there is a solution to this. It will come to an end. It's not forever. It'll be okay. I think one of the problems as a school leader is normally we're in control of our timetables and our schools, and suddenly that's been swept away and we're not in control. And being aware of that and realizing that you have to work around this and you have to have alternative plans, that's a key thing. Yeah, I'll just wrap up here. I think the other thing really is we have reopened. That's the key thing. We have reopened here, which is good. We still have we have temperature checks, masks, social distancing, but majority of things have returned to normal. And as the key speaker said, students are resilient. They will deal with it. They will get over it. There is a new kind of normal that's coming, and it's much more manageable, and students will and teachers will get used to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. There are a lot of questions that have come your way as you were speaking, but I'll need to hold on to them for just a little while and move to Ramya, because Ramya's got a back-to-back event after she finishes here, and she's being joined by people from across the world. So Ramya, for people who don't know Ramya, it'll be very few people who don't know her and her work. She's the founder and CEO for Center for Teacher Accreditation, CENTA. And with your experience of teacher certification and teacher enablement, I have one single question for you. What do you think would change for the teacher in the post-COVID world? And would she be requiring any new skills? And if she will be requiring, or actually I should be correct, if he or she will be requiring a new skill set or need to add things to their skill set, what would these possibly be and how does one acquire them? Ramya, all yours.
Sure. Good evening, everyone, and pleasure to be here today at the FICCI Arise Cambridge webinar. Yeah, so as Arunabh said, I will focus entirely on the role of the teacher. I think a lot has been covered about the broader school by both Mr. Nagaprasad and Mark, and Abha ma'am has also spoken a lot about the teacher-student relationship. Now, coming to the life of the teacher, one very obvious thing that's happening is that the competencies that a teacher is requiring today are changing. And of course, right now, it's a very heavy thrust on online teaching and the competencies related to that. 6 months out, 1 year out, we expect that this will settle somewhere in the middle. So there will be a continued increased use of technology, hopefully not as much as the crisis requirement right now, but teachers who are able to use technology effectively, as Arunabh said, will be able to deliver much better in the world going forward, is, I think, becoming increasingly clear. So that part of it is clear, that teachers will need new competencies. What else is changing in the life of the teacher? And I just want to share my screen and use a couple of slides here. Yeah, so apart from the new competencies, the second big thing that's happening, and I'm going to take a very optimistic view to this, which is that teaching is becoming live in every living room, every study room, wherever your computer is kept. It's no longer something that happens inside a classroom that parents and society by and large don't know about. And yes, with this becoming live, on one hand, the pressure is increased, which is unfortunate. And I do think schools need to set very clear norms with their parent audience on what is the level of involvement that is acceptable versus not acceptable. But at the same time, what we are also finding is that parents and the broader society are starting to recognize that teaching is an extremely difficult job, and that there are huge in-depth competencies involved in teaching, something that society as at whole hardly gave credence to. So people are starting to recognize the in-depth competencies involved. And this is also becoming an opportunity for outstanding teachers to get specifically recognized for their competencies, because school leaders are recognizing that, yes, this teacher is now carrying the brand of the school in a very public manner. And therefore, if one is a school leader, one wants to make sure that teachers are well-trained, sufficiently equipped, and the best teachers are rewarded, recognized, and retained. And in that sense, COVID could actually be for teachers what, in some ways Y2K was for the software engineering profession. It can actually give an impetus to the profession as a whole. And that's the optimism with which we are viewing the medium term at least. And related to that, the third part of it is that there are exciting career opportunities. So teaching is a very location constrained job in the physical world, but in a blended or online model, it also becomes a job that can be performed across locations. It becomes an interesting opportunity for schools to share resources. So if a school thinks they have a fantastic, let's say, physics department, then maybe they want to open a whole line of work of sharing this physics department with a much larger audience. And to that extent, for high quality teachers, high quality schools, we actually see this being an exciting time. It's an exciting time to be a teacher, to be a school leader. And yes, there are lots of immediate challenges which have been already talked about. And 6 months down the line, the people who are going to emerge from this with the right set of competencies, we see a whole world opening for them. Now, coming to the competencies in particular, and Arnab, you asked what is changing with respect to teacher competencies. I actually want to emphasize both what is changing, but also what is not changing. I think when we talk about teacher competencies today in the COVID world, we say that we sound as if everything is changing. So we sound as if everything that a teacher has learned, that the experience that a teacher has is not valuable. But frankly, when you break it down into specific competencies, you actually find that a lot of things are not changing. So a teacher's understanding of the subject, conceptual understanding of the subject, which is one of the most fundamental competencies, doesn't change depending on irrespective of the medium. The teacher's understanding of how children learn. So what is the kind of brain development, social emotional development at different stages of a child's life, and a deep understanding of that, it doesn't really change. So what changes? Content development and lesson planning, student assessment and remediation. Those are things where the teacher now needs knowledge of technology tools in terms of what is possible, what is not possible. But again, our strong advice to teachers is not to come at it from the technology side, but to continue coming at it from the pedagogical side. So what do I require to do in my lesson plan and student assessment? And therefore, out of that, what is possible, not possible? What are the compromises I need to make? What are the additional possibilities that technology is offering? So continue to come at it from the pedagogical side with technology tools getting integrated rather than leading with technology. Finally, of course, classroom communication is probably the skill where the biggest amount of change is seen based on medium. And there is a whole set of new skills to be built related to that. And then there are some skills changes in what we call professional competencies, which is your relationship with your peers, your work planning, time management, etc. Some changes with respect to basic communication skills and so on. And I won't get into too much detail here, given the time. And finally, what are some ways in which teachers and schools can build some of these new skills? And here I'm going to actually take the liberty to share a bit of how we as Center approach this, because that's what I understand most closely. That is the approach I'm working on day in, day out. So first thing is, we strongly believe that teach testing and certification, which leads to opportunities, is what creates the impetus for training. Otherwise, as a school leader, as a school, one can always have hundreds of training workshops, but and you can even force somebody to sit in a workshop. You cannot force somebody to learn. And the impetus for learning for any adult, it's not just a teacher, for any adult, any professional, comes from saying that yes, my own career can also grow in tandem with that learning. And teachers are no different. So there is no reason to expect that a teacher should learn without career growth. And the best schools around the country, or the schools that are dealing with this around the country really well, are actually starting to figure out, how do I reward my outstanding teachers better and recognize them better so that there is an impetus for learning in the broader teaching community. And as center, I mean, couple of very quick things. I mean, we have a center teaching quotients test leading to a benchmark score that some of you in the audience are aware about. We have now made this online, something that can be taken anytime, anywhere, with a special track dedicated to online teaching. And it's also the first step of what we call Center Teaching Professionals Olympiad, our annual competition in December, which interestingly is becoming an international competition this year. So we came across a lot of teachers from across countries who said, why is this restricted to India? And we said, yes, I mean, in the new world, why is this restricted to India? So it's actually been launched as an international competition. And as Arnab said, at 5:30 today, there is something related to that. But coming back, when there is the right set of opportunities, we find that professional development can become extremely customized, outcome-driven, and self-motivated. So if I, as a teacher, know that this is the set of skills that I need to build, once I build these set of skills, I can do well in my delivery with students, and I will be appropriately acknowledged for the same. Then I have every motivation to work on my own self-development. And that's again the model that we pursue as Center through our My Center learning platform. The learning it's a free learning platform for teachers, for schools. And we bring together a large number of affiliated training programs, products, services to the larger community of teachers and schools. So to give you a couple of examples, there are a bunch of activities from a math organization called Hey Math, which have gone through explicit accreditation by Center. There are a bunch of activities on logical ability by an organization called Ed6. There are also a bunch of international organizations who have gone through explicit accreditation with Center. We are by the way, a certification trademark now, similar to what you see on food labels of ISI or FSSAI. So there is explicit accreditation, review and accreditation that we do of specific programs and bring them to teachers. From time to time, we also bring our own programs. So right now, for example, we are running this 5-week Center course and certification for teachers to rapidly build a bunch of skills on online teaching. And that's like a batch starting every week, etc. And all of this, we push very hard that it is the teacher who takes the agency, and the school that is supporting the teacher taking the agency to sign up, and not like a top-down government mandate or a regulatory requirement. This is the need of the market, and that's what we would like to support teachers and schools with. So coming back to the recap, a bunch of new competencies to be built along with the old, and I want to underline the along with the old. Great opportunity to be recognized for your competencies, and exciting career opportunities for teachers as well as opportunities for schools. So that's the tone with which I would like to end, along with all the challenges that all of us are facing.
Thank you very much, Ramya. I know that you have to rush out and you may drop out in a bit, but there is this one question that got popped up, and I want to ask you. Yeah, you're okay? Yeah. Okay, so we'll go into the questions and answers, and I have questions for all the panelists, and I will try to go around. For viewers, we understand that we are overrunning the time a little bit, but the kind of questions that have popped up, I feel that these questions need answers. At least some of these questions are imperative. So we are going to extend this a little, but if you have something else that you need to be doing and you want to drop out, it'll be absolutely fine if there is something more pressing that is going on. I just see on the chat box, there's been posted some alternatives to Center as well. There was a question, Ramya, that came your way, which was, our Center course is paid. I know that there is some amount of fee that is involved, but it is very minimal. So, but they're fantastic. So people can go and look at those. People can also go and look at the Cambridge PDQs that Cambridge has been running, which is for not just for teachers who teach Cambridge curriculum, but teachers who teach all sorts of curriculum. Ramya, the first question goes to you. Will teachers become obsolete?
No, I mean, frankly, the only reason why we work so hard at Centa, and the only reason we even set up Centa 5 years back, is because we are absolutely convinced that teachers are the center of the education system, and there is absolutely no replacement for teachers, neither technology nor parents. So just to be very clear, neither technology nor parents, absolutely no replacement for teachers. And as you rightly put it, Aruna, to repeat your line, yes, teachers who are unable to use technology may become obsolete. And that's not just technology. It also goes for teachers who don't have a conceptual understanding of their own subject, or who don't have the right communication skills. And that's true for all professionals across fields. But for teachers with the right set of competencies, there is no replacement at all.
Thank you very much for that, Ramya. While what you're saying is something that I also believe in, but I also realize that the morale of teachers is fairly low. And I want to go to Naga Prasad and ask him this question. Teachers are out there delivering what they have to deliver, but there is a huge portion of teachers who are really demoralized. There are reports of teachers needing to go and serve in Manrega schemes of Government of India because they've lost their jobs or because schools haven't been able to pay them. As school promoters, as school leaders, what can we be doing for teachers in these times to keep their morale high and support them in times of need? Naga Prasad, if you could please.
Arnab, it is very disheartening to know all these facts and what's all happening and what many of the budget school teachers are put to. But unfortunately, the financial resources of these budget schools are so thin and they have no means to subsistence. When parents are not coming forward to pay the fee, the schools cannot pay any salaries to their staff. While the budget school managements might be also feeling very bad for what they are letting it to go, but they have very little to do. However, those who can have some means and resources, instead of not paying salaries at all, whatever is the resources available, if they are spread to all, that is a much better approach to address this issue when compared to letting some teachers go and really doing the kind of menial works they are forced to do. Teacher is a teacher and end of the day, and they have to come back and teach the students with the same motivation, and they have to inspire learning. So that school management should not forget that without teachers, schools are bare walls. So.
Right. Thank you very much for that absolutely balanced answer. Shobha wants to come in there, but before I allow Shobha to come in, I want to thank Devajyoti Bhattacharjee, who had posted this question. Thank you, Devajyoti. Hope you found your answer. Shobha wanted to add something there.
I just wanted to add, I mean, this angle, government is responsible for education and health, right? And the private sector has come in because the the demand was not met by the government. Now, when government is giving financial injection to MSMEs, right, in other sectors, why is government leaving out health and education? And surprisingly, even we at FICCI Arise have not gone to the government and said that please give financial assistance to these budget schools. And I think we should do that. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Shobha. You've been the torch bearer for private schools in this country, and you've done some fantastic work with FICCI Arise. I want to thank you for that, and I will touch base with you offline on this. We should be doing this. Mark, I want to come to you now. There are a lot of questions that cropped up, and we were expecting these two. So there are a few questions that I'm going to put together. Kanta Singh, Deepta Rai, and Mr. Venkat had asked these questions. The question is, first of all, were the parents really ready when you started these schools to say, yes, you're starting tomorrow, here you go, my child comes to you? So that is the first part of the question. And second is, when the kids came in, how easy or difficult was it for the schools to actually maintain the physical distancing that was expected of them?
Okay, sure. In terms of were they ready to come back, I think students certainly were. They were quite keen to come back. They weren't actually as anxious as we thought they were going to be. I think it helped a lot, but obviously every context is unique. In Vietnam, we'd gone a whole month without a single new case. So there was definitely a feeling that the worst was over. Obviously, each situation is going to be different. The parents equally as well. We personally, I expected fairly low attendance to begin with. And actually it was like a regular. The attendance was actually pretty average, even like pre-lockdown. So that was interesting. I think part of that, we'd kept a very strong dialogue with the parents, emailing them at least once a week, explaining the situation and explaining exactly what we were going to do in school in terms of social distancing. And in terms of how we actually achieved that, we had coming into school and leaving school, probably the school canteen, break time, lunch times, they were the most difficult things to police effectively. The students were reasonably good. I would say it's a very unnatural thing to expect students and their friends to stay 2 meters apart. So we basically tried to make it as practical as possible. Obviously in kindergarten, it's much more difficult. But we tried to make it as practical as possible. We took temperatures, but we still do take temperatures of everybody before they come in. If it's over a certain limit, they're not allowed in. Parents not allowed on campus. After school activities are cancelled. There's a lot of different things happening, hand gel before and after a lesson, a lot of practical things. And I think that all of that helps to build confidence along with talking to the teachers. I think all of those things help. And I think that kind of maybe goes through the community and they feel that, yeah, actually it is okay.
Right. Thank you for that, Mark. I want to go to Abha Adams for a extension of this question. So if when the schools reopen, if what Mark has said is going to happen, there is a question that was posted much earlier in the conversation by Mona Anand, and she says, what would be the teacher-student relationship be like?
I think that teachers are going to have to work harder to deepen the relationship. The teachers have to be much more attentive. The students have to know that they can trust their teacher completely. The little ones do. It comes so naturally. It's just middle school upwards that they are picky about which teacher they place their confidence in. And that depends on relationships. But it's active working on the part of the teacher that is going to make this happen. Students are not going to actually begin to think differently about forging relationships with their teacher. The students are going to be more dependent, for sure. They're also going to be more scared. So there is a definite possibility, and I don't know if Mark has had that experience, that in the junior classes, they may be much more clingy. And you also might see changes in student behavior in middle school. Those who were extremely daring, bright, would take the plunge, perhaps suddenly are quieter and are not doing those things that they would earlier. And they're restrained. So it is up to the teacher, junior, middle, senior, to be observant, attentive, to reach out, and to support.
Right. Thank you for that answer, ma'am. My question goes to Ramya and also to Preeti. Does CENTA or Cambridge actually have a course for teachers to prepare themselves better for this challenge?
Yeah, so we are right now running this 5-week course leading to a certification. I mean, of course, you have to clear the certification, but it's a 5-week course come certification on online teaching, where we rapidly cover in 23 hours understanding of technology, lesson planning in an online environment, student assessment, in an online environment, mental well-being of teachers and students, and a bunch of subject-specific things. Sorry.
But that's not my question. My question is, when the kids come back and there is this new need for the teacher to recreate this bond or to strengthen it, the socio-emotional aspect of it, the mental well-being aspect of it. So there is a, how do we use the tool? So that's one conversation. How do we teach the subject? That's another conversation. But how do we create this connect? Because I think this is that one thing that separates a human teacher to a computer teacher, the empathy. So how does a teacher bring that in? If there is a course, then I would want to know. If there is not a course, then perhaps I'd use this platform to request for one.
Yeah, no, actually, I'm sorry, I completely misunderstood your question. Sorry about that. But yes, so as I said, we have a bunch of affiliated partner organizations, and one of them is doing regular sort of 6-7 hour workshops on social emotional well-being for children. And these workshops teachers can sign up for from time to time on m.center.org, which is the mobile learning platform. So yes, we have explicitly reviewed and accredited that course. It's not our own course. We have explicitly reviewed and accredited it.
So possibly you can send us some information and then we can take it out. Shobha wants to add to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, we have been focusing a lot about the teachers, but once the school opens, there will be a lot of administrative staff and other staff who will also have to deal with the situation. And, each one of them will have to be given that kind of a, support to address, because as Abha said, that everybody is kind of unsure, what to expect, and the fear of contacting the infection is very, very looming, very large on our heads. So what FICCI is trying to do, and that's the component that I was talking, that we have spoken to actually some of the institutions, not so much schools, but definitely universities, who have come forward, and they said that they would need a support system, for kind of a post-COVID audit kind of a thing, where you are giving them a complete solution as to what is the infrastructural support that they need, in the sense, what kind of changes, how do they rearrange their classrooms, their, the toilets, the entire, how do they plan the mixing of teachers and students and so on and so forth. That is one part of it, which I guess people like Ramya and all are much more this thing. But then there is another part that you go and inspect the, the physical infrastructure, tell them what are the changes that are required, and where you need a healthcare expert going in and telling them, that these are the kind of changes that will, prepare them for health safety. So that is something which we will be doing. And also then once they are prepared, then going and certifying that, yes, this school is prepared to fight COVID. Nobody can say that, it's a completely COVID-free this thing, but then there are, the infrastructure and the training has been done in a manner that they can deal with the COVID scenario. And that is a service that we are developing. And we will be more than happy to reach out to people, the schools that are participating over here and try and help them.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Shobha. In fact, you've answered a question that would have come your way from Katie Kodifad, who's asking post-lockdowns, are there going to be regulations or guidelines by government for private schools as well? So what Shobha has talked about, what FICCI plans to do, FICCI also works in concurrence with MHRD and different state departments. So this is work that we're doing in that aspect. So
soon, working on coming out with guidelines. So obviously so then you need to also educate the school, administration as to what are those guidelines, how they can implement it. It's seeing a guideline in a, on a file is a different thing, and how to implement is a complete different thing. And so there's going to be a lot of capacity building and training which will be required. And these will be two-day training programs and all, but enough for them to get prepared. And then you need to do some periodic audit so that, you see that things are working out seamlessly.
Thank you for that, Shobha. Just after you had finished on Facebook, we had a comment by Chika Odile Lobby, who was asking, I hope this video is going to be available for rewatching after the live session ends. You're certainly adding a lot of value to all of us. And that's a question that I think all of us are asking ourselves. I want to quickly go to Preeti, pick her brains on what Cambridge is, or if Cambridge is doing something in this regard, and also request her for her closing remarks before I do a vote of thanks.
Sure. So on this aspect of coming back to school, the way as Cambridge we are approaching it, we're completely preparing the deck where we come back to all stakeholders and educators saying what does back to school really mean, and equipping all our teachers to handle the situation, which of course includes their mental well-being. And their mental well-being not only after the school starts off, I think they've already gone through enough. They have managed much more than anybody else has at this moment, with the same passion and motivation, and their a teacher is always dedicated to their students. So, but there is a lot of emotional anxiety that has come in from the students, from the teachers at home. They have to manage a lot. We've been conducting these regular webinars, and amazingly, we've been actually, in Asia, our sentiments are very similar. We usually, in each and every webinar, I see almost 12,000 participants there, which does say that this tops the list when it comes to the kind of information or communication teachers really want. So this back to school bit certainly is going to take care of it. And I'll be very happy to share that within the group and keep telling you that what are the resources that you really can access within your school and for your teachers. Right, so on that, and I would definitely use the opportunity to say that I really feel very privileged to be part of this discussion. We've recognized so many different dimensions of things, how to build new mechanisms of schools, what is going in the mind of the teacher, the students. In terms of the Vietnam opportunity was really, really so promising, how schools are opening. And as Ramya, you said, teachers equipping themselves with new competency, not only to teach, but their career growth as well. So I would just genuinely say thank you very much for making the time to all the panelists. And thank you, Aruna, for agreeing to moderate this session. As always, you've been fabulous with your insights and your kitchen timer. And I also would like to thank all the participants who have really joined in and given us their valuable time and such good insights with their questions. Last but not the least, allow me to take the opportunity to thank our organizing team, Samreen, who's the common face of FICCI, Ridhima, who's the face of Cambridge, and Vinay, who's been managing the backend so very well for us. I hope the discussion's been useful, and over to you, Aruna.
Right. No, the thank you has to continue. I need to thank you, Preeti, for putting this thought together on what do we do once schools come back. And this wouldn't have been possible for two ladies who are on the screen. One is you, and the other is Shobha Mishra Ghosh, who has been leading the FICCI Arise enterprise and sort of in many ways foretelling this is the next challenge and this is how we solve it. So Shobha, I want to thank you for doing that. I put this on record that you matter, and we're really happy that you are spending your time for this. I know Shobha has been spending a lot of time on the education subcommittee of FICCI and also on the health subcommittee. So she is fighting on two different front lines. Thank you for that. I want to thank Nagaprasad and the core committee of FICCI Arise, people who conceptualized that this was a entity that was required. This was an organization that was required to work alongside the government in trying to solve challenges which all of us are trying to do. I want to thank Mark. Mark, there might be questions that may come your way as we go along. Now people know that you are 1 month senior to all of us, at least 1 month. We don't know when we are reopening, but we are certainly 1 month senior to all of us. Thank you, Ramya, for making time. You're literally 3 minutes away from your next online presence. I don't know if your heart is beating fast. Mine certainly is. And to participants who've stayed on this long, this is perhaps the longest webinar FICCI Arise has ever done. There are still 141 open questions. There is no way we can answer all of those, but we are going to be attempting to answer some more of these questions in 2 more webinars that we plan to be conducting in this series. And the next one is going to be on the 3rd of June. And we are asking a different set of people the same set of questions or similar set of questions on what do we do when we come back and when schools are back, after the lockdown. So stay tuned, stay focused. Together we can, and together we will prepare ourselves for the students who are in our care. And we all need to know this. We are the best chance for those students to make the best that is to come in their lives. Teachers make the society, and there's a big responsibility that rests in all of us. thank you very much, Mitaba Adams. I've been wanting to do this for a long time with you, and I'm really glad that I got this opportunity today. So thank you, speakers. Thank you, organizers. We'll hopefully see you again on 3rd of June. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Arnab, for doing a fantastic job.
Thank you, Arnab. Thank you, Shobha. Thank you, Samrini.
Thank you, Naga, for joining in.
Thank you, Preeti.
Thank you, Abha, Ramya.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All the best, Ramya.
Thank you.
Yeah, all the best for the next session.
Bye. Bye. Thanks, Aruna. Bye.